share screen. Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It is good to see you. Thank you for tuning in. It's Rabbi Akiva Males, and I hope that you're well. Today is Wednesday. It is January 20th. We're getting ready for Parshas Bo. And I want to share some sources with you on the Parsha. I hope will enlighten you. I hope will enrich the Parsha. Some you may be familiar with, some may be new. But I'm looking forward to sharing these with you. So let's see. Here we go, Parshas Bo. Parshas Bo begins right what we've got here on the sheet. So the Parsha, it's Perek Yud, and it is Pasuk Aleph. We've had the first 7 of the Makos. Dam through Barad took place last week in Va'era. And now we have Bo. We'll have the last of the 3 Makos. The last 3 of the 10 Makos, rather, are going to take place in Bo. So we're up to Arba, because we ended last week with Barad. So we're up to Arba. So let's see. The Pasuk begins. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. God says to Moshe, Bo el Paro, I want you to go. Ki ani ichpareti es libo. I've hardened his heart. Veslev avadav, and the hearts of his servants. Isi ososai ela bekirbo. In order that I could place all these great signs that are going to be an educational lesson for the Egyptians and for Klal Yisrael, for all generations, I want to make sure that I give him a zetz, that I give him a slap with all these. So at this point, again, Paro does not have his free will. God is saying, I'm going to be giving him these final makos. Beis, 2. Ulaman tisaper ba'aznei bincha. My other goal is that I want you to tell over to your kids, to the ears of your children, uben bincha, and for your grandchildren, asheri salalti b'mitzrayim, how I made a mockery of the Egyptians. In other words, the mightiest nation in the world, I brought them to their knees. And I want you to talk to your kids and grandkids forever about all the signs and all the miracles that I placed there. And through this, you'll know that I'm the Lord. And this really is what goes on every year when we read these Parshas, when we teach it to students, and also at our Pesach Seder. We go through this and we tell, it's the telling of our story to our generations. It occurs all the time, especially at Pesach time on that yearly basis. Gimel 3. Vayavo Moshe v'Aaron el Paro. So Moshe and Aaron, they do exactly as they were told. They go to Paro. Vayamru elav, and they say to him, Ko amar Hashem Elokei Ivrim. So says Hashem, who's the Lord of the Hebrews. Ad masai me'anto lanos mepanai. How long are you going to refuse to humble yourself from before me? Shalach ami ve'avduni. Let my people go so they can worship me. Daled 4. Ki imayina tola shalech ami. If you continue to refuse and you will not let them go, my people go. Tomorrow, I'm going to bring locusts, arba, terrible swarms of locusts are going to be brought into your borders. Hey, 5. Now here's a description of the locust. They will obscure, they will totally cover the view of the earth. There's going to be so many. You won't be able to see anything. And they will eat all the surviving vegetation that remained after the plague of Barad, after the plague of hail. And they will eat all trees that grow out of the field. They're going to consume, and this will destroy you. Vav 6. They will fill up your house and the house of all your servants. All the house of all the Egyptians. This is a swarm of locusts so large that your parents have never seen anything like this. Your grandparents have never seen anything like this. From the day that they were on the earth until today. And at that point, they turned and they left Paro's presence. Those are the psukim. I never noticed this before. Okay, those are 6 psukim we read. There's something missing. What's missing? Again, look at Pasuk, Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. Aleph and Beis. In Aleph and Beis, Hashem tells Moshe to go to Paro. I'm going to harden his heart, and you're gonna make a speech to him. And in Gimel, Moshe and Aaron tell Paro when they're speaking to him that you're refusing to send my people. God's going to smack you. And then they start talking about Arba. But the question about the plague of locusts, the question is, where did Hashem instruct Moshe about locust? How does Moshe know what the next Makkah is going to be? Again, they're just coming off of Barad. All the time so far that Hashem has told Moshe, I'm sending you to go back into Paro's palace and warn him he better send the people out. And Paro, if you don't, then this is the next plague you're going to receive. Here, that piece of information is missing. Here by Arba, Hashem tells Moshe and Aaron, your job is to go back into Paro. And your job is to tell Paro, let my people go. And after you tell Paro, let my people go, you got to let him know he's going to be slapped if he doesn't. But nowhere does Hashem tell Moshe and Aaron, oh, by the way, the next plague is going to be Arba. If Moshe and Aaron were not told that the next plague is going to be Arba, how in Pasuk Daled through Vav, Daled, Hey, and Vav, how are they giving this description of Arba? Nowhere has Hashem told Moshe and Aaron what the next plague is going to be. How are they telling Paro that if you don't let him go, Hashem's going to smack you? Okay, but then how do they know to start describing what the next plague is going to be? That it's going to be locust and how severe it's going to be. Where does Moshe and Aaron, where do they have this information from? I never noticed this before, but this is a question that the Das Zakeinami Balei Tosfos asks, and you're going to see, this morning we're going to see multiple approaches to how to deal with this question. But again, this never caught my eye prior to this year. Let's see the Das Zakeinam. This is what the our Balei Tosfos, this is what their commentary, running commentary to the Chumash. So on the bottom of page 1, it goes on to the top of page 2. Boel Paro. So Hashem tells Moshe, go to Paro. And then ... maybe Machar. And then Moshe on his own, it looks like, is saying that if you don't send them out, tomorrow you're going to get walloped. You're going to get the plague of locust. Umoshe heich yada. Where does Moshe know this from? How does Moshe know that the next plague that's up Hashem's sleeve is locust? We never found anywhere in the Torah, you look at Psukim, Aleph and Beis, there's no indication there that Hashem has given Moshe and Aaron a sneak preview. Again, all the previous plagues, he's told them that if Paro says no, this is what he should expect. But by Arba, Hashem did not say that to Moshe. So where does Moshe have this information that when he's standing before Paro, he says that if you don't listen, you don't send Bnei Yisrael out, you're going to get smacked with Arba. Where does Moshe know this from? So Yesh Lomar, here's his first answer. Shahayu chakukos al hamata. Moshe figured it out on his own because engraved into the special staff that Moshe had was Ditzach Adash Be'achav. On Moshe's staff was the acronym of what all the Makos was. Ditzach, we say this every year in the Haggadah, right? We start spilling out a little bit of wine into our saucer at the Seder. Ditzach, Adash, Be'achav. Ditzach stands for Dam Tzfardei Akinim. Adash stands for Arov Dever Shechin. And Be'achav stands for Barad, Arba, Choshech, and then Bechoros. So the first answer that Das Zakeinam gives is, you know how Moshe knows the next one's going to be Arba? Because he looked at his staff and he's saying, you're right, Hashem did not give me this information, but I see we're up to the Aleph in Ba'achav. So I figured out Aleph is Arba. That's his first answer. So Vakashali says, but I don't like this answer. In other words, there must have been people out there suggesting this. Now he says Vakashali. Now, what I would have said, if you asked me why males, why don't you like this answer? I would say what I heard her say. She's in the background. I heard Layla just object. She says, okay, Moshe knows the next plague is going to start with an Aleph. But how does he know Aleph? All the Alephs. We could think of a laundry list of bad plagues that start with an Aleph. How does he know Aleph is going to be Arba? And even if he knows it's going to be Arba, how does he know the extent of Arba that it's going to be what he gives to Paro? How does he know that? Maybe Aleph stands for something else. That's what I would have said. If you want to know, if you ask me, males, what don't you like about that answer? That's what I would have said. And that's what Layla said. Look at that. We're on the same page. So that's what I would have said. However, that's not the objection that Das Zakeinam brings up. Maybe others offer that objection. I don't know why he didn't. Maybe others do. But let's look at what the Das Zakeinam's objection is. He goes, Vakashali. You know what I don't like about that answer is in Cain, if that's true, that Moshe had the intuition to figure out from the Aleph, that Aleph stands for Arba, in Cain, b'makos achronos, with the next couple makos of Choshech, and then Bechoros, amai hutzrach lodio. Why would Hashem have to tell him that? If Moshe has the ability that he could just look at his staff, see a letter, and figure out what makkah is coming next, So then Hashem should have said, oh, okay, Moshe, I see you got it. You got great intuition. You're really good at taking cues. So there's no reason for me to tell you what that Choshech is coming. There's no reason to tell you that Bechoros is coming. You're going to figure that all out. Now, again, why just those? What about all of the previous ones? I would have also had that question on this. In other words, I would have asked the Das Kedim's question a little better. I don't know, better, but stronger. I would have said, okay, if Moshe, if Hashem sees that Moshe has the ability to just look at a letter and intuit what the plague is going to be, not just why does he spell out Choshech and Bechoros, but what about the previous 7? Why did he feel the need to spell out the previous 7? So that's the problem that the Das Kedim has with this, that he doesn't like the idea that Moshe could just look at a letter on his staff and figure out what the plague is going to be. Okay, so that brings us back to the question, the original question of, Hashem did not tell Moshe that Arba is coming. So if Hashem did not tell Moshe Arba is coming, all he said was go to Paro and tell him, you better let my people go or you're going to get smacked. So if that's all he told them, so then how does Moshe Ma'aro know to tell Paro in those last several psukim, Gimel through Vav, how does Moshe know that Arba is coming? So let's see what the Das Kedim answers. L'chein, it's the second last word on the line. L'chein nirali, therefore it appears to me, how do we answer this question? The Haven Moshe Hamake. Moshe understood on his own. He had intuition only about Arba. He could not have figured out the other plagues, but there was something about Arba he was able to figure out. Why? Since God said to Moshe that Liman Tisaper, I'm going to bring the next plague is going to be something for them to talk about. It's going to be the type of plague that is going to create an incredible amount of buzz around the water cooler. Everyone's going to be talking about this around the campfires. Everyone is going to be talking about this one for years. Since Hashem referred to Arba, to this next Makkah that way, Moshe was able to figure out it's Arba. How? The derech hu l'saper al makas ha'arba. The way of the world is when there's a really bad plague of locust, it gets everyone talking. Where do we know this from? Well, he's going to bring a reference because one of our Nevi'im, Yoel, that's one of the Treyasar, one of the 12 prophets. So that section of Navi called Treyasar, one of the prophets in Yoel, you'll find V'derech l'saper al makos. We find in Yoel, Sharei gam b'makas arba di Yoel, in the time of Yoel, that was Joel, the original Yoel. In his time, there was also a plague of locusts, and there, Ksivaleh, Tanakh records, Livnechem sapru. You'll speak about this to all of your kids. So there's something about Arba, that Arba creates conversation. Arba creates chatter. So since Moshe picked up that Hashem said, Laman Tisaper, that this next plague is going to be one that's going to get everyone talking, Moshe says, I got it. That was a good hint. Now I got it. It's like, imagine he's like on a trivia show. So he was just given a hint. And now Moshe says, I got it. It's going to be Arba because he said, Laman Tisapru. And that's something that everybody, it's the natural inclination to get talking about. I think we would all agree here. The question's better than the answer. We like the question. But Layla's raising a good point. We're going to see one of the commentators ask. We'll get there in a second. Layla's asking that Yoel hasn't happened yet. It sounds like the way the Das Kedim is going to deal with that is that you're right. Yoel hasn't happened yet, but it's common occurrence in the world. Everybody in the world knows whenever there's a plague of locusts, everyone schmoozes, everyone talks about it. It happens to be. If you're looking for a reference in Tanakh, how do we know that's the case? Das Kedim says go to Yoel. But it sounds like everyone knows that even up to that stage of history, whenever there's a bad infestation of locusts, everyone talks about it. That seems to be what the Das Kedim is saying. Now, again, I think this is one of those, I looked at this Das Kedim and I said, I like the question better than the answer. The answer just didn't really do it for me. But let's look at the passage in Yoel, the psukim in Yoel that talk about this. So this is in Yoel, it's Parak Aleph. So it says, Dvar Hashem asher hayal Yoel ben Pesuel. These are the words, this is the Nevuah, this is the prophecy that was given that Hashem shared with Yoel, who was the son of Pesuel. Shimuzos hazakenim, hear this, you elders. This is what Yoel is going to say to the elders. Ha'azinu kol yoshvei aretz. Let everyone, inhabitants of the land, everyone should listen and pay attention. Did this come about in your days or in the days of your forefathers? Allah livnechem saperu. He says, tell your children about it. And all their children should tell their children for every generation. Yeser hagazam, what the shearing locust left over, achal arbe, the increasing locust devoured. In other words, it sounds like there was one batch of locusts, whatever they left over, the next batch of locusts devoured. V'yeser arbe, achal ayelek, and what the increasing locust left over, the nibbling locust devoured. V'yeser ayelek, achal chasel, nibbling locust left over, the finishing locust devoured. So it seems like there was all these different types of locusts, one after the next, after the next, after the next. And Yoel says this is something that everyone's going to talk about. So the Das Kanem is saying, what do you see from Yoel? That when there's bad locust, everyone talks about it. So Layla asks the question, well, why are you bringing a proof text from Yoel? Yoel hasn't happened yet by the time of Moshe. Good question. We're going to see someone else asks that as well. So let's see. That's going to be the Moshe of Zakanim. The Moshe of Zakanim is another collection of work from the Balei Tosfos. And they bring down the same question that's bothering our Das Zakanim Balei Tosfos. They want to know, where does Moshe and Aaron have this information from that the next plague is going to be Arbe? And let's see where I got that finger. So he gives a couple of answers. And now he brought down this answer about Moshe figured it out on his own because of Hashem said you're going to talk about it. And everyone knows locust, it creates conversation. So he says in the middle of the second to last line, the enza teretz nira. I don't like that answer. Sharei lo nemar hahu kra di Yoel. This pasuk of Yoel was not said ad yamim harbe acher Moshe, for many generations after Moshe. So I don't like this idea. Okay, Moshe is able to figure out that Arba gets people schmoozing. And what's the proof text? From Yoel, that it says in the prophet Yoel, Joel says that Arba is going to get everyone talking. Okay, Yoel hasn't happened yet. So, okay, so maybe the Das Kanim would answer back, okay, this is like kind of what I was saying to Layla before. What the Das Kanim was saying is everyone knows, even at that point in history, everyone talks about a locust. It creates a lot of chatter. All the Das Kanim was doing when he went to Yoel was to say, I'll bring you a proof in Tanakh. But that's not what its answer is based on. The answer is not based on Yoel because Yoel hasn't happened yet. His answer is saying it's a natural occurrence. People always talk. And if you want to ask me, where in Tanakh do you see that this is true? Okay, go to Yoel. You'll see that it's true. That's how I think the Das Kanim would defend himself against that question. But be that as it may, I'm still at the point where I think the question was better than the answer. That the question was, again, how do Moshe and Aaron know that the next plague is going to be Arbe? We don't find anywhere in the Chumash that Hashem said this to them. So for that, we're going to go to the Ramban. The Ramban, he's going to give us an answer that I think is the one that sits best with me. It's really not, it's no massive chop. It's no massive, really creative answer, but it's a very logical answer, and it just seems to make a lot of sense. And this is the one that sat best with me. So the Ramban's bothered by this too, and he writes as follows: V'nei hodia HaKadosh Baruch Hu ato LaMoshe. In the first two psukim, where Hashem says to Moshe, "I want you to go to Paro and tell him he's going to get slapped if he doesn't listen." So Ramban says, "V'nei hodia HaKadosh Baruch Hu ato LaMoshe makas arba." He did tell him about it. The Torah doesn't tell us about it, but I'm telling you, Hashem told us about it, and the Torah just didn't record it. And he told him, I want you to tell this to Paro. Why on earth would Hashem have told Moshe and Aaron, gather up and go to Paro, if I didn't give you any instructions to tell him? The whole pattern that's been playing itself out until now is Hashem calls Moshe and Aaron and says, okay, it's time to go back and issue another warning and tell him what's going to happen if he doesn't listen. Why would Hashem have sent him back to Paro to warn him and tell him what's going to happen if he didn't tell Moshe what's going to happen? Below Nizkar Rak B'Divrei Moshe Paro. It just happened in this incident in the Torah. The Torah did not record for us that part of the conversation. The only part of the dialogue about Arba that was recorded is what Moshe told Paro, but it just left out the part that Hashem said it to Moshe. It happens. The Torah doesn't record every single conversation. So we can rest assured the conversation took place. Hashem told Moshe. Moshe didn't figure it out from looking at his mateh, from looking at his staff. And he also didn't figure it out because God said it's going to be something to get the people talking. And Moshe says, oh, what's a plague that gets people talking? Arba. What? And people aren't going to be talking about Sfardeh, about the crazy frogs. They're not going to talk about Dam. They're not going to talk about Kinim, Shechin, Barat, all that other stuff. That's not going to be conversation. Come on. Those answers just didn't sit well with me. So Ramban's saying very logically, but unexciting, Ramban's saying he told him, just the Torah didn't record every piece of the conversation. And then he says, V'chein katzar lemala b'makas habarad. I'll prove to you this is the case, because if you look back at the plague of hail, barad, there also were some things that were omitted in the pasuk. Shesiper divrei HaKadosh Baruch Hu al Moshe hisyatzev lifnei Paro v'amarta elav. There it says that God said to Moshe, I want you to stand before Paro, and I want you to give him a full warning about what's going to happen if you don't send him out, and about Barad. Below hisker divrei Moshe al Paro klal. So there it's like the opposite. The Torah, Hashem told, we have the record of Hashem saying to Moshe, gather around because I want to send you back to Paro and give him the full warning about Barad. But by Barad, you don't find that conversation of Moshe to Paro. Moshe just lifts his hand and Barad starts falling. You don't find that Moshe verbalized that warning of Barad to Paro. And that actually caught my eye this year when I was looking at the psukim. I said, something's missing here. So this Ramban actually is beautiful because what the Ramban is saying, you're right. Not every part of the conversation was recorded, whether it was the conversation of Moshe, of Hashem to Moshe, or the conversation of Moshe to Paro. So he's basically saying, here's the converse. That's what the Ramban is saying. I'll show you another place where it's not fully recorded. Kamoshe Perashti, and he goes, I said this out over there. That was earlier in Barad, in Pasuk Yud Tes, in the previous chapter. The Sibazeh, what's the reason behind this? Why sometimes did the Torah shorten the dialogue? The Sibazeh, Shlo Yirtza Laharich B'Shneim. The Torah says, come on, there's really, it's a challenge. We got a lot of ground to cover, and there's not always enough time to get, for us to record the conversation Hashem gave to Moshe and then what Moshe gave to Paro. We don't always record everything. Sometimes something's left out. So by Bara, they left out the part of Moshe telling it to Paro. And here, by Arba, they left out, the Torah leaves out the part of Hashem telling it to Moshe. The question you could have here is, okay, so why did they pick these two? Why do other plagues do we get the full dialogue? And in two places, the Torah chooses to be makatzer, to be succinct. That I don't have an answer to. But that's what the Ramban is explaining here. The Ramban is saying, don't get hung up on this. Surely Hashem had this conversation with Moshe. He didn't figure it out on his own. There's too many questions if you're going to say figured it out on his own. None of those answers really look good. So we say the conversation definitely took place. It just wasn't recorded. Not everything was recorded. And I'll prove it to you because by Bara, not everything was recorded. That's how the Ramban deals with this. Again, I just found this fascinating. Let's see the next source. The next source is what happens after Moshe and Aaron leave. They give the warning about Arba, and now let's see what happens next. So let's read these psukim Zion through Yud Aleph. So Zion, Vayom Ravde Paro Elav. So Paro's servants say to him, come on, they were trying to talk some sense to him. Ad masa yezeh lanu l'mokesh. How long will this one be a stumbling block to us? Shalach hasan Hashem ve'avdu es Hashem Elokehem. Let them go and let them serve their God. Don't you know that Egypt is going to be destroyed if you keep carrying on like this? Ches 8. So they call back Moshe and Aaron and say, okay, let's bargain. And they come back before Paro. You guys could all go, but just let us know who's leaving. Well, we want to take a head count. Test 9. With our youth and with our elderly, we're going. With all of our sons, all of our daughters. We're going to take all of our animals, all our livestock, because it's a holiday for Hashem. Yud. So then Paro says to them, okay, so he says, okay, so that Hashem could be with you, like what you're all asking for. I'll send you guys out, also all with your kids. But you should know, you should know that evil is before your faces. We're going to have to see what that means. Yud Aleph. And then, what did he say? Again, what did Paro say? Paro says, I'll let you go with just you and your kids. He didn't say you can leave with all your animals and everything. So he says, Yud Aleph. What? Right. In other words, Paro didn't say anything about going with the elderly and with the animals. He said you can go with your kids. So Yud Aleph 11, Lo chen, luchu na gvarim, ivdu es Hashem. So Paro says, not so, let the men go and worship. Ki osa atem mevakshim. So he didn't say anything about the ladies either. He says you can go with your just the men and the kids, but nothing about the women going and nothing about the elderly, nothing about the animals. He says, you the whole time, or just tell me you want to worship. The ones who that should involve are the men. You're not going with anyone else. And they chase away Moshe and Aaron. That's what happens. question is, what did Paro mean when Paro says to him in Yud, Ru'u, you should see, ki ra'a neged penechem. You should see that evil is before your faces. What does that mean? So there's a number of different commentaries on this. I want to share with you what Rashi does. Rashi does something so cool. I always was struck by this Rashi because this is a Rashi that plugs in. He's going to use a medrash. And if you learn like this medrash, it plugs in a lot of fascinating holes throughout Chumash. Let's see. So he says, Ru'u ra neged penechem. You should see that evil is before your face. So he first says, you should learn this like how Onkelos, how Targum learns it. Okay, we're not going to get into Onkelos now. Medrash agada shamati. But there's a medrash that I heard that explains this so nicely. What is that? Kochav echad. There is one star out there in the galaxy. Yesh sheshmo ra'ah. There is a star that is out there in the constellations whose name it's referred to as Ra'ah. Amar lahem Paro. So Paro, after consulting with all his sorcerers, Paro says to them, Ro'ani be'itztaginos sheli. I am able to tell with my stargazers, with all my sorcerers. Also, kochav ola lekraschem b'midbar. I got news for you. You guys think you're going out to this wilderness and it's going to be all fun and games. That star that's called Ra'ah, that's what he means. Ru'u, you should see ki Ra'ah neged penechem. That star named Ra'ah is going to be over you in the wilderness. V'hu simandam. The star of Ra'ah is a sign for blood, v'hariga, and killing. Ukeshechatu Yisrael ba'egel. And basically, and that's what Paro was saying to Moshe and Aaron. He says, okay, you guys want to go out there and think that there's going to be a celebration and worship. You really want to go into the wilderness. I'm warning you, all of my sorcerers see the star of Ra'ah is going to be over you, and that always involves bloodshed. So he's trying to scare them and intimidate them not to go through with their plan. And now look what he does. He uses this to plug in parts of Chumash. Ukeshechatu Yisrael ba'egel. After Bnei Yisrael sinned by the golden calf, ubikesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu lahargam. And Hashem wanted to destroy Bnei Yisrael. Amar Moshe b'tfilaso. Look at the words Moshe used, how he's convincing Hashem not to destroy Bnei Yisrael. Lama yamru Mitzrayim. Why should the Egyptians say, Lamor, why should the Egyptians say, Bira'ah hotziyam? Bira'ah hotziyam. Why should the Egyptians say, we always learned that to say, that God took them out with a bad intention to kill them in the wilderness. But Moshe is saying, but the Medrash is saying, no. Why should the Egyptians say, Bira'ah hotziyam? That Hashem took them out to face off against Ra'ah. Zui Shamar Lahem. And this is what Paro was kind of saying, Ru'u ki ra neged penechem, is that Paro was saying, I see Ra'ah is what you guys are facing in the wilderness, which always connotes killing and bloodshed. So Moshe is saying to God, you can't kill, he's got Hashem like in an arm wrestling match. He's saying, Hashem, you can't destroy Bnei Yisrael, because if you destroy Bnei Yisrael, that's going to bolster up the Egyptian claims that there's something to this stupid constellation, stupid star called Ra'ah, that designated the fact that we were going to be met with death and destruction in the wilderness. You can't kill Bnei Yisrael. Lama yomru Mitzrayim lemor. Why should the Egyptians say Bira'ah hotziyam? Yeah, it makes sense that Bnei Yisrael died in the wilderness. Bira'ah hotziyam, because our sorcerers were right that star of Ra'ah met them there. That's what he's saying. Look what happens. Miyad, immediately, what is Hashem's response? Vayinachem Hashem al hara'ah. That Hashem repented of Ra'ah, meaning God all of a sudden cooled off and says, I'm not going to do the evil plans to you. But what he's darshaning it, the Medrash is saying, Vayinachem Hashem al Ra'ah means that Hashem says, that's a good point. I can't hurt Bnei Yisrael because that'll bolster this false ideology of this star called Ra'ah that's out there, and that's going to bolster idolatry in the world. But at the same token, what does Hashem do? Hashem says, you know what? Everybody out there says that Ra'ah, the star of Ra'ah, designates blood, and they think it means murder. So Hashem says, in a sense, what will I do? I'll show them what blood. I'll show them how they were totally off. Yeah, there's blood facing Bnei Yisrael in the wilderness, but it's not because they're going to all be destroyed. It's because there's going to be a mass bris milah before they enter into the land of Israel, the days of Yoshua. That's what he says. V'hafachas adam l'dam milah. So Hashem says that, okay, what blood are Bnei Yisrael going to experience in the wilderness? The blood of bris milah, of getting circumcised. Shemol Yoshua son, because Yoshua gave them a mass circumcision before entering into Israel to have Korban Pesach. Zeu shenemar, and that's what it says in Yoshua. Hayom galosi es cherpas mitzrayim me'alechem. So Yoshua says to them, and this is recorded in the Navi in Yoshua, today, when you finally had this mass bris milah, he says, today I have taken away cherpas, the shame or the reproach of the Egyptians from you. So what does that mean? We always thought that means, okay, because it was an Egyptian custom. The Jews had stopped giving bris milah when they still lived in Egypt. And then after they were in the wilderness, they couldn't do bris milah. So in a certain sense, they had the shame of the Egyptians were on their bodies. They looked no different than the Egyptians. So that's the plain reading of the text. Yoshua says, now that you all have bris milah, galosi es cherpas mitzrayim elechem, I've removed the shame of the Egyptians from you. But now he's saying, according to this medrash, Yeshua was saying something more. Now that all the blood that Bnei Yisrael has experienced in the wilderness had nothing to do with being murdered and destroyed, but rather was just about getting bris milah, at this point, I have removed all the rumors of the Egyptians for 40 years in the wilderness. They're saying, I'm telling you, there's blood on the horizon because of Ra'ah. We saw, our stargazers saw Ra'ah. So now Yeshua says, now we're going to make them look like fools. Because what blood is there? Yeah, they had this mass circumcision ceremony. They've been saying for 40 years, the Egyptians are predicting that Bnei Israel is going to face massive bloodshed in the wilderness. They were saying, we see in the wilderness, you guys are going to face massive blood. Now they're able to say, we had bris milah. You guys don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're talking about. So that's how Rashi quotes this medrash, which really, look how many issues that takes care of. Number one, it takes care of what Paro was saying to Moshe in our Parsha. And he says, Ru'u ki ra'a neged penechem. He was warning him, saying, my stargazers see that star Ra'ah is what Bnei Yisrael are going to have in the wilderness. That means you guys are facing bloodshed and destruction. So what does Moshe say? So that's one place it's used here to say a deeper message of what Paro was saying to Bnei Yisrael, to Moshe to tell about Bnei Yisrael. And then after the Egel, Moshe uses that word Ra'ah, Lama Yomru Mitzrayim Leimor, Bara'ot Siyam, is that he tells Hashem, you can't destroy Bnei Yisrael, because that's just going to bolster what the Egyptians have been saying about this constellation, about the star Ra'ah, and that's what they foresaw in the wilderness. And then after Hashem says, okay, I'm not going to destroy Bnei Yisrael, it says, Vayinachem Hashem ala Ra'ah, that God, so to say, he withdrew of this, right? In other words, Hashem withdrew his evil plans. It's a plain reading, but now V'nachem Hashem al Ra means Hashem realized I can't go through with this because of that Ra'ah argument, because of that constellation, that star named Ra'ah. And then one more thing is that later on, it makes sense of when Yoshua tells Bnei Yisrael, today I've taken away the shame of the Egyptians. He doesn't just mean because now, until now, you were indistinguishable on your bodies between you and the Egyptians. He means today I took away the shame of the Egyptians for 40 years. They've been telling everyone, we see that Ra'ah star, which indicates bloodshed. Now they can say, okay, we were fools. That blood was bris milah, had nothing to do about Bnei Yisrael getting slaughtered. So I thought this Rashi always caught my eye. It's a very fascinating Rashi. This Medrash quotes how many places in Chumash and Tanakh he's able to add a new dimension to. I want to share one more item with you because this jogged my memory this year. If you study anything about ancient Egypt, you'll find one of the names of their false gods that they always used was called Ra. I found this fascinating. Here's something I found in an encyclopedia, Ancient History Encyclopedia. And again, I'm not saying this matches up because there's a whole debate in the historians, both the Jewish historians and the world historians, exactly what point the Exodus occurred. So I don't know if we're able to put it down and say with definity at what point in Egyptian history this happened. But look at this entry under Egyptian gods in this Ancient History Encyclopedia. So one of the Egyptian gods, they got him there as Ra or Atum or Re. So the great sun god of Heliopolis, whose cult spread across Egypt to become the most popular by the 5th dynasty. The pyramids of Giza are associated with Ra as the supreme lord and creator god who ruled over the land and living of the dead. Ra was among the most important popular gods of Egypt. Even when the god Amun rose in prominence, Ra's position was undiminished and he merged with Amun to become Amun Ra, the supreme god. And a lot of the Egyptian hieroglyphics, they associate, I found it interesting that Ra was a sun god. You always see like this orb. So it's interesting. So again, I'm not saying that this exactly lines up with the Medrash. The Medrash could have been centuries before they had this develop that there was this great sun god called Ra. It could have been that there was a point earlier that at an earlier point in Egyptian history, it was a star, not the sun, but some star that they called Ra, and it was associated with bloodshed. That's that. Now, again, once that was part and parcel of Egyptian cult following and their superstitions, later on, as Egyptian superstitions continued to develop, now it becomes the sun god that's called Ra, and then Amun-Ra, whatever. I'm not saying this lines up perfect. What I just find to be incredibly coincidental or not coincidental is here's this medrash telling us to make that our sages had a Masorah, they had a tradition that Ra'ah, that something that sounds like Ra'ah, was a name of an Egyptian deity. And here you see that it's well known that in ancient Egyptian society, Ra was the name of what they called their sun god. Again, is this an exact match? I don't know. I don't attempt to make that claim, but it would make sense to me that even if the Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Exodus took place centuries before this, because they said it didn't coincide with the pyramids. So even if the Exodus took place centuries beforehand, this name was just part of their polytheistic belief and part of their orbit of their gods that they had this whole philosophy about, and somehow or another that carried on and developed to become this Ra, which we see later. I found this fascinating. Let's see one more item. So we're going to take a look here at Choshech. So it says a little bit later, of course, Paro doesn't obey to let the Bnei Yisrael out after the Makkah of Arba. So the next plague is Choshech. So let's see, Chaf Aleph, and you'll see this kind of relates to the first thing we saw. So Chaf Aleph 21, Vayomer Hashem Moshe, Netei yadcha al hashamayim, stretch up your hands towards the heavens, V'choshech al aretz Mitzrayim, and there will be darkness over the land of Egypt, Vayomesh Choshech, and the Choshech will become thick and dark. The commentaries learned it was like a piece of fog. It actually held them in place. Phase 22. So Moshe does lift up his hands to heaven, and there's this really thick darkness that falls down over Egypt, Shloshes Yamim, for 3 days. Of Gimel 23. Lo ra'u ish es achiv, lo kamu ish mitachtav, Shloshes Yamim, u'lechol b'nei Yisrael hayu or b'mashvasam. And there was nobody was able to see themselves, and nobody was able to stand up for 3 days. But the Jews, they all had light. So that's what happens. Now here, there's also something missing from the text. Look at the Moshav Zakanim. You don't find, this caught my eye, you don't find a warning for Choshech. You find, again, you don't find anything written that Moshe went to Paro and said, I'm warning you, if you don't let Bnei Yisrael out, you're going to get walloped with the plague of darkness. You don't find that recorded anywhere. Why? So he says, Yesh Lomar. Look at his answer, very creative answer. I didn't see other commentaries ask this. They might ask this. This just really caught my eye. Why isn't this, there's no warning issued here. So he says, Yesh Lomar, because it's written, Ulechol b'nei Yisrael hayu or b'mosh vasam. Pasuk Chav Gimel 23 said is that in those initial 3 days of darkness where it was so thick that no one could see or move, the Jews had absolute light. So that's part of parcel of this is that Bnei Yisrael would have light. Zeh davar lo gila Mitzrayim, but Moshe didn't want to reveal. Hashem didn't want Moshe to reveal this detail to the Egyptians. If they would know that the Jews would have the ability to see, then they would hide all their valuables. And what did Hashem want? Part of what Bnei Israel was supposed to do during Choshech was supposed to go through the Egyptians' homes, not take anything, but to see where all the valuables were. So then they could come back before leaving Egypt, and they could say, we know what you have, and we'd like payback for all of our years of servitude. So part of what Hashem wanted during Choshech was Bnei Israel to go rifle through the Egyptians' houses. And had Moshe given over the full instructions, which contained this clause that even though the Egyptians will have darkness, the Jews won't have darkness, then the Egyptians would have hid their stuff, thus frustrating the plan. So therefore, so therefore, all Moshe would have done was revealed to Paro only part of the story. He wouldn't give him the whole story. Lo kulo lekach lo nichtava. Therefore, that's why the Torah didn't record it, because Moshe did give Paro a warning for Choshech, but he didn't give him the full warning. He only gave him a quiet. Hashem didn't want him to give him the full story. So the Torah didn't record it because the Torah wasn't interested in recording something which wasn't the full story. The Torah only wants to record when it's all the details are included. But here, Moshe, he says, did give him a warning about Choshech. However, he didn't give him the full explanation of what was going to go on because he didn't want the Egyptians to hide their stuff in a place where the Jews wouldn't find it. And therefore, Moshe didn't give him that part of didn't give him those details. Since he didn't give him those details, the warning as given to Paro wasn't recorded because it wasn't all of the information. If it's not all the information, we're not recording it. That's how the Moshe Zakanim answers that. I thought that's a fascinating answer. Again, I just didn't see others. I'm sure it's not the only answer. I just didn't see others address this, raise the question, and then offer an answer. And with those, we've got a couple of insights into the Parsha this week. Again, just to review rather, is that we started off looking at the plague of Arba. We had the question, where did Moshe and Aaron know anything about the plague of Arba? It wasn't recorded. The Hashem didn't tell them about it. And we saw different answers from either the Das Zakanim, the Moshe Zakanim. They didn't sit well with us. And finally, we saw the Ramban's answer. It says, yes, sometimes recorded, sometimes it's not. Notice how that fits with this last of our Torah that we saw, that again, the warning over Choshech wasn't recorded. And it seems like the Moshe Zakanim here is saying, almost like the Ramban, yeah, the Torah doesn't always record everything. Because again, since it only would have recorded part of the details, it didn't bother recording it here. And in the middle, we saw that fascinating Rashi about Ra'ah, that what did Ra'ah mean? That it didn't just mean its literal meaning, that Paro was trying to say, I see you got bad things on your horizon, but rather, or I see that you guys are being treacherous in your dealings with me. You're trying to be deceitful. That's not what it meant. Rather, Paro was trying to intimidate them, saying, oh, I see with my astrologers that you've got some doom and gloom coming your way in the wilderness. And then now look how that plays in, and that's able to plug in so many different parts of Tanakh to open new dimensions and new explanations to it. And then I thought that was fascinating. And then lastly, we saw that again in ancient Egypt, the name Ra was the name of one of their gods. Again, it could have been at a later point after Yetzias Mitzrayim, but no doubt, if it was so prominent at that point, it makes sense to say that in an earlier point in Egyptian history, Ra that name still played a role in their whole scheme of things, how they thought that the upper worlds functioned. All right, with that, I'm going to stop recording.